Hello, brothers and sisters. This is Grooms here. Got another special guest again here today. Got Brother Jon Phelps here, the author of Vatican Assassins. Just a tremendous brother. Also teaches the private citizenship course to regain your status. And I'll put all this stuff in the description box. You can check him out at 24/7 World Radio. But let's just go ahead and get into it. How you doing, brother?
Good, Brother Tommy. It's always good to hear from you and good to be with your listeners.
Well, thank you. It's always an honor to have you. We're going to touch on some things here today that you're not going to hear from the pulpits. That's one thing I love about Phelps. Brother Phelps here, he'll tell it like it is. And but before we get started, Eric, I take it that you're fixing to start your own YouTube channel and join us here.
Yes, my webmaster had that all set up on my computer a couple of years ago. I just never got around to it, but I've decided that I'll be on YouTube 3 times a week for 10 minutes a day, just to give a high point of something and then let it go. So hopefully I'll have some listeners and be able to make some progress with this, because I think now is a very critical time in this nation's history. And I think it's important that more and more people know how the way things are, how they really work. So what took me 30 years to discover, hopefully I can just give it 10-minute segments.
Well, it'd be wonderful. I mean, you're a walking book as it is. I mean, I've learned so much from you through the Protestant Reformation to the Jesuits, on and on and on. And, you know, one of the big things that really helped me, Eric, is I was caught up into the whole blaming the Jew thing. The Rothschilds, you know, they controlled it all. And, you know, it was through your teachings that I seen that, you know, it's these Roman Italian families that you never hear about that are the real money.
That's right. And another thing I just got thinking about is, why don't we touch today on the creation of what we know today as the Masonic Jewish Labor Zionists? Because I'm being accused by these fools that I'm a Zionist and that I'm a shill for them and so on. So I have always attacked the Masonic Jewish Labor Zionists. There's never been a time I haven't. And I've always said that they're controlled by Rome. So maybe it's a good idea that we should go back into the 19th century, show the birth of the Zionist movement, and to show that without the Pope blessing Theodore Herzl, there is no Zionist movement. So we'll deal with that topic too also.
Oh, you just made me think of something. Let me ask you this. Without Theodore Herzl, is there a World War II?
Why, of course.
Okay.
Theodore Herzl was just a reporter, you know? He was a reporter that went to the Dreyfus. We'll deal with the Zionists right now. You want to do that?
Hey, take us where you want to lead, and we're just here to listen to you, brother. And
okay. Number one, to understand labor Zionism, you have to understand the Knights Templars. Without the understanding of the Templars, without the understanding of the papacy creating Islam, there is no understanding of the Masonic Jewish Labor Zionists. So let's go back. Let's go back to when the nation of Israel was destroyed, Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70, and the Jews were taken captive to the nations. And we have, Trajan coming in after the 1st century, decimating the place, throwing salt in the earth, and making sure that no Jews would ever go back to their land. So Rome has always hated the Jews. The Roman Empire, the Roman Caesars hated them. And when the popes took up the mantle of the Roman Caesars, every pope has also hated them. Okay? If you read a book titled Rome Stoops to Conquer by E. Boyd Barrett, who was a former Jesuit, he will tell you that Ignatius Loyola hated the Jews, that no Jews were allowed in the Jesuit order at this time of the writing of Rome Stoops to Conquer. And Jews were only allowed to join the Jesuit order in 1946 after World War II. So the Vatican and the Jesuits have always hated the Jews and always wanted their land. This is where we come up with the doctrine, the heresy of what's called replacement theology.
Amen.
Replacement theology is strictly a Roman Catholic amillennial heresy that seeks to justify Rome's claim to what the Bible calls the land of Canaan, or also the Promised Land, or also the Holy Land. Right? So the Vatican wants, this is the most important piece of dirt on the face of the earth to the Pope. And Jerusalem is the most important city on earth to the Pope, in addition to Babylon. Those are the two most important cities. So, the Knights Templars came about in the early 12th century, around 1115, something like that. First came the Knights of Malta, then the Knights Templars, and the Teutonic Knights, which were German. And the Knights Templars, they were known as the Poor Knights of the Temple of Jerusalem. And their whole purpose was to rebuild the Hebrew Temple for the benefit of the Pope that the Templars served. Well, of course they didn't succeed. God in his providence used the Muslims to drive out the Knights Templars out of what was called the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1291. The boundaries of the Kingdom of Jerusalem are nearly identical to the boundaries of the nation of Israel today. That's why I call the nation of Israel the Pope's revived Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, because that's how he looks at it. He doesn't look at it as Israel. He looks at it as his revived Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem that had all the Roman Catholics killed, all the Knights Templars driven out in 1291 with the Knights of Malta. So, with Allenby taking Jerusalem again in 1917, Allenby was a British Freemason and the general who took Jerusalem from the Turks. He dismounted his horse and he said, "I will not enter Jerusalem as a conqueror.
Is that right?
I will enter Jerusalem as a pilgrim." And he went through the Jaffa Gate when he entered into Jerusalem in 1917. So, the Jesuits in control of the British Empire then took Jerusalem with Allenby in 1917. This will facilitate the building of the revived Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem. Prior to 1917, that was one of the purposes of World War I, to break up the Ottoman Empire. Because to revive the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Ottoman Empire, had to be broken up. And so it was finally broken up and ended in 1924. The last caliph of the Ottoman Empire was in 1924 when Ataturk took over Turkey, who was also a high-level Mason.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have is the papacy wanting to revive the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem since the days of Christopher Columbus, or Cristobal Colon, who was a Spanish Jew. He was no Italian Roman Catholic. He was a Spanish Jew, and he was the one who called for making Palestine a homeland for the Jews. And you can read about this in Jeremiah Crowley's great work titled Romanism, A Menace to the Nation, written in 1912. He was also the author of another tremendous book titled The Pope, Chief of White Slavers, High Priest of Intrigue. Those are his two masterpieces that we all should have for our libraries. Now, Cristobal Colon, alias Christopher Columbus, called for making Palestine. And Palestine is the Roman name for the land of Canaan. Okay? The Romans always called Israel or Canaan Palestine. Okay? So that's another reason why we utterly repudiate the term Palestine or Palestinians. It's all Roman.
Isn't it really the Philistines? I mean, is it not a translation of Philistine?
Yes. Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay.
So Rome is acknowledging that the Jews have no right to the land. That's what they're saying by that very term. Rome utterly denies the Jews have a right to their land. What they want to do is use them as cannon fodder for the building of the third Hebrew temple, which the Templars have always wanted. That's why they were created, the Knights of the Hebrew Temple, Knights of the Temple, so that when that happens, then Israel in the future will be a killing floor for all the Jews of the world. That's the purpose, to drive them all back to Israel in one final, last, mad attempt to kill them all there. Okay? So, in this movement called Labor Zionism, it starts not only with Columbus, but it's also furthered by Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte, as I show in my book, was a Jesuit coadjutor. The only way you can understand the Napoleonic Wars is to understand and know that he was merely taking vengeance for the Jesuit order that had been expelled from France, that had been expelled from Portugal, that had been expelled from Spain, that had been expelled from Malta by the Knights of Malta. That's why Napoleon went down there, took all their weapons and treasures for the invasion of Egypt. That's how we understand Napoleon's invasion of Egypt, when he killed off the Mamluks, the bodyguard of the Sultan there in Cairo. That was payback, Jesuit payback, for the Mamluks driving out the Knights Templars out of the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1291. That was payback. This is why Lincoln said in the 50 Years in the Church of Rome, he's quoted by Chinagre, that the Jesuits never forgive, nor forsake, nor forget. They always come around to take vengeance someday against their enemies. And Russia is a classic example of this during the Bolshevik Revolution. So, going on now with the Labor Zionist movement, Napoleon called for the Palestine to be a homeland for the Jews too. That's one reason why he invaded Acre. He wanted to begin to secure a place for a Jewish return to their land. Not to mention the fact, though, that he did persecute the Jews in Europe. Napoleon was a Jewish persecutor. So now, we have all this in the foreground, the Jesuits wanting to have a homeland for the Jews, really the revived Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem. The open but false policy is it's going to be a homeland for the Jews. The secret but true policy is going to be the revived Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, run by the new Knights Templars called the Jesuits. So, in the 1880s or so, we have Alfred Dreyfus, who was a captain in the French army, and we had the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 71. In this war, that the Jesuits incited France to attack Germany, Protestant Germany, because the Second Reich was Protestant. From 1871 to 1918, it was Protestant Second Reich. So before the Reich was created, really, we have the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, where France, Roman Catholic France, attacks Protestant Prussia, and it is led by Napoleon III. And Napoleon III is the most abject, devoted servant of the Jesuits, with his wife, another fanatical Roman Catholic named Josephine. Okay? So they invade, they attack Germany, they want to have this war, so Germany trounces France in 6 months. France is utterly defeated. Napoleon III surrenders at Sedan, and at Versailles, the treaty is finalized, and that also begins the Second Protestant Reich in Versailles, Paris, in 1871. Well, later on, several years later, about 9 years later or so, Captain Alfred Dreyfus, who was a French captain in the French army, who was a racial Jew, Hebrew Jewish Israelite, he's accused in France of being a traitor, of giving information to the Germans that enabled them to quickly win the Franco-Prussian War. The ones that were responsible for this, the ones that controlled the press in France, were called, not the Jesuits, they were called not the Jansenists, they were called it eludes me right now. But they were another order, another suborder of the Jesuit order. And they controlled the anti-Jewish press in Paris to incite the Parisians and the people of France against the Jews, against Alfred Dreyfus. And so, as a result, Alfred Dreyfus is found guilty of treason, and he's sentenced to Devil's Island for 10 years, which is a death sentence. Okay. Well, as a result of this, many Frenchmen knew that this was wrong, and they campaigned for the release of Dreyfus. And ultimately, Dreyfus was released, and a French Roman Catholic was found to be the source of all this problem. His name was Esterhazy. Okay. So Alfred Dreyfus is freed, and he is pardoned from what he's been accused of. But at the time of his trial, this was an international trial, there was a Viennese correspondent there whose name was Alfred Dreyfus, whose name was Theodor Herzl. Theodor Herzl is the reporter there that's reporting all of what's going on at the trial. And his conclusion is, we need a homeland for the Jews, because this is going to continue to happen. So he begins to write and advocate a Zionist movement for a renewed Israel, for a Jewish homeland. And it just so happens that Theodor Herzl took a trip to visit the Pope, I believe in 1904. Shortly before Herzl dies, he has an audience with the Pope. And there, see, you don't have an audience with the Pope unless you're invited.
That's right.
You don't have an audience with the Pope unless you're going to do his bidding.
That's right.
And so, therefore, it's here that Theodor Herzl is the one who is commissioned by the Pope for the reestablishment of the nation of Israel, beginning with a homeland for the Jews. And the financier, the foremost financer for this couldn't openly be a Gentile. It would have to be a Jew. So therefore, Baron Rothschild will begin to finance this quest, so it can look purely Jewish, but when in fact it's absolutely Jesuit, using certain of their Jewish coadjutors. Right? So, what happens is we have World War I. We have the beginning of the Jews starting to repopulate that barren desert called Israel. It's still under Turkish rule at this time. But as a result of World War I, the Ottoman Empire will be destroyed, and the leading Ottoman there, the Sultan, will participate with King George V, who is the king of Great Britain. He will participate with him in the deliberate destruction of his empire, because the final Sultan is also a high-level Freemason. Right? The travesty of Gallipoli, or is it that battle there in Turkey? Gallipoli?
Yeah.
100,000 beautiful white English and Scotchmen killed, machine gunned down by the Turks as they're ordered to charge into their guns. This is the Jesuits destroying the British white Protestant and Baptist peoples in foreign war. And Gallipoli in World War I was one of those horrible sacrifices. Okay? Remember, the Jesuits have several things going on here at the same time. Destruction of the Protestant Reformation in Great Britain, destruction of the Reformation in Germany, the setup for the destruction of Jews in World War II, and the creation of a homeland for the Jews as a result of the breaking up of the Ottoman Empire. Remember, the Jesuits are the great Hegelians. They have Hegelian dialectic. They can think along 10, 15, 20, 100 different lines at the same time. That's why it's very, very difficult at times to understand what they're doing. So, with this, the white paper is issued in the 30s. Britain issues this white paper, and it allows for only several thousands, tens of thousands of Jews to go to Israel. The rest will be deliberately corralled in Europe and not allowed to leave Europe. The ones responsible for this are the wicked sinners Franklin Damnable Roosevelt, Smokin' Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill will only allow, the British government will only allow 10,000 Jewish children to emigrate into Great Britain. The rest will not be allowed to come there. You're going to have Stalin. Stalin was trained by Jesuits at Tiflis University, and the major Jesuit was masked as an Orthodox priest. I have his name in my book, and he was the one that tutored Stalin to hate the Jews and so on.
And Stalin was what, quarter Jew?
No, Stalin was not a Jew at all. Lenin was.
Oh,
Lenin was a
my
quarter
bad.
Jew.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Neither Stalin nor the chief of police, Lavrentiy Beria, neither of them were Jews. They were both apostate Orthodox Christians. Okay. So Stalin and Hitler will work together for the entire duration of World War II.
Yep.
And one of the things they do in working together is to make sure no Jews in Eastern Europe can escape into Russia. That's called a no man's land. There was a book released about 4 years ago. It's called Bloodlands. You need to get it, because there it documents the murder of the Jews of what was called the Pale of Settlement. And it was all facilitated by Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler working together.
Well, didn't Hitler have Stalin build most of the concentration camps and the Red
20,000 Red Army soldiers built Auschwitz.
Mm-hmm.
So Stalin, under the guise of these soldiers being captured, they were really sacrificed, he donated his soldiers to build Auschwitz.
Mm.
Remember, Stalin had a daughter, Svetlana, and she married a Jew. He hated that she married a Jew. Okay. So Stalin killed every Jew that was involved in the Bolshevik Revolution except one, Lazar Kaganovich. Lazar Kaganovich was his token Jew, later leaving Russia and settling in Israel before he died, I think, in the 60s. So Stalin hated the Jews, Hitler hated the Jews, because they were both tutored by Jesuits. Hitler was tutored by Jesuits in Vienna and Kiev area, and that school he went to, and Stalin was tutored by Jesuits at when he was tutored by Capuchin priests in Gori, and later given a scholarship to Tiflis in Georgia, because remember, the Jesuits had been expelled from Russia by the great Alexander I in 1820, and they remained expelled from Russia until 1922, when Lenin and Stalin readmitted the Jesuits into Russia after them being formally suppressed and expelled for 102 years. So the Jesuits were not allowed in Russia, but they were allowed in Georgia. So they're tutoring Stalin to be the great communist dictator when they put him in power over Russia, so they could kill many, many thousands of Orthodox priests and nuns that were enemies of the papacy. Okay, back to labor Zionism. As the labor Zionist movement continued, they realized that they had to have a Eurasian Jewish Holocaust to be able to then drive the remaining Jews to Israel. So the Eurasian Jewish Holocaust, which really took place in excess of 6 million, more like 6.5, maybe 6.8, maybe 7, because they burned tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of bodies in pits and then buried them like Babi Yar in Russia and many other places. So they did this for two purposes: to purge Eastern Europe of its Jews so that it could be thoroughly Roman Catholic again. Hungary being Catholic, Czechoslovakia being Catholic, the Slovaks are Catholic, the Czechs are Protestants. So remember, the first ones to go to Auschwitz were Protestant Czechs, not the Jews. And Hitler the SS had a concentration camp in the Netherlands exclusively for Reformed ministers. We're never told that one either.
Yeah, they went first, did they not?
Yeah, many of them did, that's right. Because they were protecting the Jews. They weren't going to go along with this.
That's right.
The decent Protestant Baptists will not stand by and watch the Jews be mass murdered. It's just not going to happen. So they had to get rid of them too.
So this is kind of payback for Bismarck in a sense, and what he.
Well, yes, yeah. Well, Bismarck suppressed the Jesuits and the Kaiser Wilhelm I.
Yep. Yep.
Bismarck had the Falk laws, where he arrested priests in the pulpit that were inciting treason against the Kaiser.
Amen.
Bismarck was a Lutheran. He was a saved man. He said, I believe a Roman Catholic can be saved. He said, I believe, but no Pope can be saved. That's what Bismarck said.
They done for that. What was it? He said they've already committed the ultimate sin of blasphemy of.
By blasphemy of the Holy Ghost. That's
yes,
right.
sir.
Now, I don't believe blasphemy of the Holy Spirit can be committed.
No, I don't either.
But nonetheless, Bismarck had a point.
Right. That's a good quote. Yeah.
Yeah. But nonetheless, the labor Zionist movement starts. By the way, remember, Bismarck and the Protestant government there of the Second Reich enfranchised 550,000 Jews in Germany. Gave them the vote. Jews were blessed in Protestant Germany during the Protestant Second Reich.
Yep.
And they would become great inventors. They became great soldiers. They became very great in the Protestant, Prussian, German Empire. As God said they would be. I'll bless those that bless you, I'll curse those that curse you. So Prussia was tremendously blessed. They had tremendous inventions, steam engines and light bulbs. And they had the greatest army in Europe. They had von Moltke. I mean, they had everything because one of the reasons was they were preaching the true gospel. There was a great awakening there under a particular German preacher. And then they were protecting the Jews, not persecuting them. And Bismarck was keeping peace with Russia so as not to alienate Russia and make Russia want to attack Germany. So, what's the first thing that Kaiser Wilhelm does? Kaiser Wilhelm II, he relieves Bismarck of the chancellorship in 1890, opening the way to make war with Russia, which he did at Tannenberg in World War I. So, the Zionist movement is born. These are the labor Zionists. Now, by the way, at the time of the World War II, there was another Zionist movement, and they were called the revisionist Zionists. And these revisionist Zionists were the true Jews who wanted a homeland for the Jews themselves. And they were led by a man who had the nickname of the Lone Wolf. His name was Vladimir Jabotinsky. And there's a 2-volume set written on him called Lone Wolf. I recommend your listeners get it. And Vladimir Jabotinsky said, all 3 million Jews here in Poland are going to die. Ben-Gurion said, all the Jews in Poland are going to die. But Jabotinsky tried to get him out. And for that, he was driven out of Europe. He fled to New York City, actually the state of New York, and he died mysteriously in a little town called Hunter, New York. So Jabotinsky was a true nationalist, a true patriot. He wanted to have an Israel for the Jews. They were called the revisionist Zionists. And the revisionist Zionists were the ones that backed the Irgun. The Irgun were the real secret soldiers wanting to free Israel from the British, not the Haganah. The Haganah were full of traitors. Haganah later became affiliated with the Labor Zionists. The Irgun were the revisionist Zionists. And the Irgun were totally killed out or driven out of power by the time Israel is created in 1948. So, what do we have here? We have the hand of the papacy keeping real, true, nationalistic Jews from coming to power in Israel. Hence, the destruction of Vladimir Jabotinsky, the destruction of the revisionist Zionists, the destruction of the Irgun. And what will take their place is Haganah, which is now Mossad. And Mossad, according to John Loftus, was created by the CIA in 1951. So what is the tail and what is the head? The tail is Mossad, the head is CIA. And Oliver North, that CIA officer, had much to do in coordinating with Mossad in the days of the Iran-Contra affair. Okay? So, going on here now, we have the labor Zionists starting the nation of Israel with traitors, David Ben-Gurion, and other traitors who were involved in the Eurasian Jewish Holocaust working with the Nazis. The labor Zionists worked with the Nazis. One of them, who was involved in a great scandal, was blamed by a particular Jew of working with Kurt Becker and sending, 400,000 to 600,000 Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz.
Wow.
That man's name was Rudolf Kastner. You can read all about Rudolf Kastner and Kurt Becker working together, and Adolf Eichmann, to send all these Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz when Eichmann wanted to send them to Israel. So, Kurt Becker is accused of this in 1959 or so, 1960. He is a right-hand man of the Ben-Gurion government, and as a result of this, the Jewish gentleman who accused him of this was put on trial for accusing Kurt Becker of this, and he was found not guilty.
Mm.
And so as a result, there was going to come a trial for Rudolf Kastner. And he just happened to be gunned down at his home there in Israel so that he could not be tried. This saved the government for Ben-Gurion. The other thing that saved Ben-Gurion's government was the capture of Adolf Eichmann in Buenos Aires in 1960. They let Mengele go. They let all the other top Nazis go. Bormann was in Buenos Aires also. No, they're going to capture the Lutheran boy, the Adolf Eichmann. They're not going to capture Roman Catholic Mengele, who was known as Father Mengele in Bavaria. Mengele was a Bavarian Roman Catholic, the most fanatical of all German Catholics. And so they're going to let him go, and he'll die of old age there. They'll let Bormann go, he'll die of old age there. All the big top Nazis that went to South America, all of them Roman Catholics, they're going to pick their little Lutheran boy, Adolf Eichmann, a little colonel, and they're going to blame him for the Eurasian Jewish Holocaust. Okay? That will further save the Ben-Gurion government and make it look like Ben-Gurion is really pro-Jew and pro-Israel, that they can have their own country. So, since Golda Meir, David Ben-Gurion, Rudolf Kastner, Chaim Weizmann, all of them are traitors. All of them traitors to the Hebrew Jewish Israelitish people, because those men and women are busy working for the Pope. Golda Meir exalted Pius XII as a protector of Jews when she knew very good and well he was the heart and soul of the Eurasian Jewish Holocaust overseen by Vladimir Ledochowski, who was a Jesuit general from 1915 to 1942. So, the Jews running Israel are labor Zionists. They are traitors to the Hebrew Jewish Israelites living in that land. And my personal friend Barry Chambers, that I talked with today, was driven out of Israel because he told these truths. They tried to kill him a couple of times, so he had to leave, and he lives in Florida today. So, that's the story of labor Zionism. And anybody that says I'm for labor Zionists must refute what I just said for the last half an hour. I'm against them, but I am for the Hebrew Jewish Israelitish people living in their own land to the exclusion of every Arab and every black and every Hispanic and every Asian and every white man. Those Hebrew Jewish Israelites have a right to their own land so they can preserve their own race, language, and culture. That the 13 tribes will be preserved for the future millennial kingdom when Christ will set up his kingdom of David once again as he sits on the throne. So that's been my position. That's always my position. All right. Next topic.
Well, a couple things here. Regardless if it's a Rothschild thing or not, it was still founded in one day. It fulfills Scripture.
Yes, it partially fulfills Scripture because the Bible teaches Ezekiel 38:8 that the people are gathered back from the nations, and it's a land of unwalled villages. And so, I mean, it's not unwalled villages today, but it will be.
Right.
And but there has to be an Israel in existence for the second coming of Christ. Otherwise, I do not understand Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10. And they shall look upon me whom they pierced. That day the Spirit of grace and supplication will be poured out. And they shall look upon me whom they pierced, poured out upon Jerusalem. Therefore there has to be a Jerusalem occupied by Jews. That's never been since after 1948. So, most assuredly, there has to be a revived nation of Israel, a city of Jerusalem occupied by Jews in a condition of unbelief, not knowing their God. That's exactly what the prophet said.
That's it. Okay.
That's why the two witnesses will be coming. The two witnesses of Zechariah 5.
That's right.
The two candlesticks, which Revelation 11 says they're two prophets. And I maintain they're Moses and Elijah.
Yep. So do I.
It will be okay. So anyway, that's labor Zionism. I utterly repudiate it. I repudiate any other Zionist movement. I repudiate Christian Zionism. I am for the Jews having their nation of Israel, but I'm not for their government. Hagee and all those other guys back the government of Israel when they should be rebuking it and telling them they're working for the Pope. Benjamin Nitwit Yahoo is busy working for the Pope. All of them have been.
Perez, it goes on.
Perez, that's right. That's why Perez gave the Temple Mount to the Pope in 1993. That's
crucial there. A lot of people don't know that.
Crucial. And that article was written by Joel Boehnerman, the late Joel Boehnerman, my dear friend, and Barry Chamish. When they wrote that article, and they got the information from an Italian newspaper called La Stampa. So, the Temple Mount is owned by the Pope, and his Muslims occupy it today.
That's right. Okay, I got a couple questions here for you, Eric, that's been sent in, if you don't mind answering. Sure. One, this guy wants to know, was there any original Jews that was a part of the original Illuminati?
No. And I prove that in my book. The original Illuminati founded didn't have one Jew in it. Had several priests, many Roman Catholics. I have the book on my shelf. In fact, it might be in front of me here. It's one of my favorites here. Hold just 1 second, okay?
Yeah. Brothers and sisters, I pray that you soak this information in and study these things out. Very critical topic, and these Jesuits, they're crafty and they're wicked. And you got to remember, Hitler, he designed everything after the Jesuit order. He was so obsessed by it.
I can't seem to find it, but I know it's on my shelf here. But in the book, it's written in 1930s, and it shows how the Jesuits founded the Illuminati, and that there wasn't one Jew in it when it was founded.
That's right.
There were Roman Catholic priests, there were Roman Catholic officers, but there wasn't one Jew in it. Yeah, and I put it in my book.
Weishaupt, he taught canon law for I can't remember what college it was at the time.
Ingolstadt. It was a Jesuits college.
Yeah,
the Jesuits are not going to have any Jew teaching at their college at this time. Jews are not even allowed in their college.
That's right.
They're in their order. Adam Weishaupt was a German, a Gentile white German. He was not a racial Jew. That is not true.
There's just a big movement going on now. It don't matter what program it is. All these people are coming out, so-called Christians, and blaming the Jews. It's the Rothschilds. It's these evil people. And now you got Stephen Anderson coming out saying that America's Babylon. And I don't know how he's getting that, reading Revelation 17 and 18 literally. But he's actually going that far. And
he'd say anything. I mean, he's a coadjutor. He's a troublemaker. He is blaming the Jews. Whenever anybody blames the Jews as the ultimate source of problem and perfidy, they're Jesuits. Because I can easily prove it's the Jesuits, and the Jews involved are working for them. So that's not a problem.
Okay.
These Jews in CFR, Chucky Schumer, that senator from New York City, is working for the Archbishop of New York. That's why he attends the Al Smith dinner every year.
Bernie
he sits
Sanders.
in the front row with the Archbishop.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders. He just met
Bernie Sanders. He's a 33rd degree Jewish Freemason, and the lodge is right in the building there in which he's in Burlingame.
Yeah, I seen that on something. I can't believe that the press won't cover that.
He's a brother Mason. Donald Trump's 33rd degree Freemason. I mean,
Absolutely.
Donald Trump has Jews in his family, but he's still working for the papacy, and the Jews involved are working for the papacy. They're not loyal to their own Hebrew, Jewish, Israelite people. Not in the least. The Jews that are loyal to their own people have no standing. When Rabbi Meir Kahane was in New York City many years ago, he told all those Jews in New York, he said, listen, he said, all of you are going to be killed here in North America, which is what I'm saying on my broadcast 3 times a week. He said, you're all going to be killed here in North America, and you all need to make Aliyah back to Israel. As he left the meeting, he was shot dead. Any Jew that is truly for his people is not going to have an ear of the press. Just like any black man that's truly for his own people is not going to have the ear of the press. Just like any white man that wants to be truly for his people is not going to have the ear of the press. Or they're going to try to shove us into the category of being racist and prejudiced and sexist. When all we want is to preserve what's ours. He that standeth on his own rights injures no one. So the press in this country, totally controlled by the Jesuits, does not allow any Jew to be a public figure unless he is subject to somehow, some way, to the Pope of Rome through the Council on Foreign Relations, because most of the influential Jews are CFR members.
That's right.
So that's what we have today. So in answer to the question there, no, Weishaupt was no Jew. There were no Jews in the Illuminati. The Jesuit Illuminati were in alliance with the Sabbatean Frankists. Because remember, Jacob Frank and his Jews were baptized into the Roman Catholic Church in Poland. Hey, I had to bring this out to Barry Chambers. She left it out. I just had to remind him. And so these Sabbatean Frankists are really Roman Catholic Jews, busy serving the Pope.
Wow.
So that's the horrible dilemma that the 7 million Jews in North America find themselves in, and that the Jews in Israel find themselves in. That they are led by traitors that are betraying them for land, for peace, and you name it. And but the Lord's going to preserve the place. Israel will never be destroyed. And after this crusade, it'll be more powerful than it has ever been. But its government will still be subordinated to the Pope.
Well, got another question here, and I'm kind of interested in this one also. There's this movement too about the whole Khazars. The Jews are Khazars. Well, what do you say to that?
I have articles on my website about that. You can go to VaticanAssassins.org and go to my archived articles and pull up the article on the Khazars.
Okay.
Okay, let's talk about Khazaria.
Okay.
Khazaria was, you would call it Eastern Europe, just north of the Black Sea, that general area, north and west. Khazaria was a Gentile nation composed of whites primarily. There were also blacks in it. And there were also Jews that lived in Khazaria that were the great men of commerce. Okay. Khazaria, the leaders of Khazaria decided that they would openly embrace Judaism because they did not want to align themselves with the Muslims to the south of the Ottoman Empire. And they did not want to align themselves with the Orthodox to the north with Russia. So that was a political decision when they decided to become religious Jews. But it was only, like, I think it's King Boris, Bolin, whatever his first name is, that led the way with some of his nobles. But the people of Khazaria, they were never Jews.
When
they were never
this?
racial Jews.
1800s, 1880s, somewhere in there?
This is in the 800s, the 8 and 900s.
Really? Okay.
Yes, this is how early it is, yes. The 8 and 900s, that general vicinity. The two books on this that are most well known are called The 13th Tribe by Kustler Khazar, who was British intelligence and a traitor to his own Jewish people. And then there was Kevin Allen Brooke, who wrote the book The Jews of Khazaria. Those are the two foremost books on it I have in my library. But they come to wrong conclusions by saying that there are no such things as racial Jews anymore, that they've all been miscegenated, race mixed, and they're totally gone.
Yep.
Well, if that's the case, well, then we can just take the Bible and rip it up, and there is no God, there is no nothing. Because he said that as long as the sun and the moon endure, the nation of Israel would endure, and he would preserve them, and he that touches thee touches the pupil of my eye. So he's never, ever going to allow those 13 tribes to ever be totally race-mixed out of existence. It's not happening. Because the land has to be divided into the 12 tribes according to Ezekiel 48. When the kingdom of David is reinstituted.
Amen.
Ezekiel, so no, the Khazars are Gentiles. They are not racial Jews. And the Jews that live there did not race mix very much, because Jews don't race mix because they're always persecuted. And so who wants to be a Jew? So they were persecuted there, and then they were driven west, and ultimately into Western Russia and to Eastern Europe. And ultimately then the wicked Catherine the Great whore of Russia, Catherine II, she will begin what is called the Pale of Settlement. And she will begin to drive Jews west, and Jews will be driven east by I believe it was Frederick the Great, Frederick II and Catherine II. They both lived at the same time. And they will begin to create what's called the Pale of Settlement, which will be the killing floor for the World War II Nazis and NKVD, for the roundups and the destruction of the Jews of the Pale of Settlement from 1941 to 45. So Khazaria, there's not a Khazarian syllable in the Yiddish language. And Barry Chamish does a very good job in proving that even the DNA proves that the Jews are not Khazarian. So this whole Khazarian heresy was started, and I researched this for 6 months. Went to many different major libraries, went to DuPont Library in Delaware. Researched this extensively and found out there was no such thing as calling the Jews Khazarians or Khazars until the early 1900s. And this lie, this heresy was born out of Vienna, Austria. The Jesuits were behind this, Viennese Jesuits, to produce this lie, so that people will say there's really no Jews anyway.
Mm-hmm. That's where Stephen Anderson goes with it.
Yep. So that's the Khazarian heresy.
Well, Erica, we're running out of time here. I got about 3 minutes left. If you don't care, you care to plug us here and let everybody know how to contact you on the private citizenship, or how to get
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, you can contact me at my email at rbppchurch, Reformation Bible Puritan Baptist, rbppchurch@comcast.net. Be glad to answer your email. If you're interested in the course, I recommend that you do take it, because apart from doing what you need to do, you're going to be surety for this all-cap stranger that was created by the state when it was registered a few days after your birth. And so you'll cease to be surety for a stranger pursuant to Proverbs 11:15 and a few other things. So I recommend you take my course so that you can see what the Jesuits have done with their threefold cord of making you surety for a stranger, 501c3 churches, and departing from the King James Bible. And you go to my website, you can purchase my ebook, and you can get my Clear and Present Evil, you can get my reference library of 1,100 titles. There are many things there that would be good for your learning. And if you want to support the broadcast, if you want to support my ministry is fourfold. It's preaching the true gospel, defending the Reformation, attacking and exposing the Jesuits and the Counter-Reformation, and encouraging the Hebrew Jewish Israelites to leave North America. I figure they have anywhere from 2 to 4 years to do so before the persecution really begins, because Donald Trump is not going to be president. It's going to be Hellcat Hillary. And when that happens, you're going to have millions of angry white men that will further create fascism in this country. So that's my predicament of what they're
Okay, you're going to have to come on to another show to get into this. We'd love to have you back here shortly if you don't care. I'd like to touch on Hellcat.
So send your donations to RBT, Reformation Bible Church, Reformation Bible Trust, P.O. Box 306, Newmanstown, Pennsylvania, 17073. And I'll take your donations. If you'd like to give them, please pray for me 60 seconds a day. I always ask my listeners to pray for me. And may God bless us and send a great awakening. Because, and I forgot to read this, we need a great awakening or else we're finished. America is finished.
Amen. And you know, it don't take much. We can just be like Paul and preach Christ and Him crucified, and it will change the nation. Everybody,
we water, we plant, God gives the increase.
That's exactly right. And so many people are caught up in the side notes of there's a new thing going on about the Mandela effect, and there's a time loop, and they're changing the Bible. People need to get away from that. Let's just preach the gospel. And
that's right. Bible will never change.
That's right. That's absolutely yeah. Psalms 12, Psalms 138.
That's right.
God has magnified His word above His name. That's right. And well, we're wrapping it up here. But Brother Phelps, it's always an honor to have you on. And